Hello and welcome back to High Desert Voices. I'm Brie Castellini, and today I am joined by my former creative writing teacher, Jim Van Pelt. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you for inviting me. Good to see you again.
Thank you. You too. I am really trying to train myself to call you Jim because we are both adults now, but I have to tell everyone it is very hard. I really just want to call him Mr. Van Pelt. He looks exactly like he did when we were in class together, when he started the Write a Book in a Year club, and it is a little bit surreal to be talking to you as like two adults.
Well, I have pictures from those times, and I can assure you I don't look the same.
I don't think that that's true.
I'm missing
think that
hair.
you're lying.
I had darker. Any rate, it's changed.
All right. Well, this is an audio format, so nobody can tell that. All
get
they
it.
can hear is that you sound as sprightly as ever, and we're delighted that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
So today we are talking about short story collections, anthologies, and my first question to you is just, what do you think makes a great short story? Because it's different from what makes a great story generally, what makes a great novel, what makes a great novella. So I'm curious from your perspective, what makes a great short story?
I just gave a talk at the Rainforest Writers Retreat, really closely related to this subject, and the talk was, what is a good short story? And it threw me into an existential crisis because you cannot answer the question, what is a good short story, without going straight to what is good.
Sure.
Right? What do we mean by good?
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, because I was talking to a bunch of writers, saying, look, we can't really tell when we are good, but we can tell when we're better. And so from a writer's viewpoint, you're always trying to be better at what you were doing. And somebody else may apply that label and say it was good. For me, a good short story would be the same, I think, for a lot of other people. It's something that engages you. It is a shorter form, so it's likely that you'll finish it in a sitting, and that it will move you some distance emotionally or intellectually. It will provoke thought. It could be that the writer their goal was just to entertain you, and that's why you went, right? But you were entertained. Mm-hmm. You laughed because it was funny, or you cried because it was tragic, right? But that gets you into your reaction. That gives you a reaction. A short story that leaves you flat, I would say, is not a good short story for you as a reader. It might be really good for somebody else, but it's not good for you.
What about the difference between what makes a great short story versus novel? Because I will say for me, I have always struggled with short form storytelling in prose and in screenplays and scripts. When I went to screenplays for a decade, short films is where you're supposed to start. I couldn't start there. I had to start in web series where I was essentially doing a feature film just over the course of, short form episodes, but I still needed the full season to tell the story I wanted to tell. I really struggled to shrink it down. And so on a craft perspective, almost, what would you say is sort of the difference between short story, novel, and, what makes a good story for each?
Wow, you throw some good questions at me. A lot of it is just length is the difference, and that means that you have fewer beats in a short story than you would when you're telling the story of a novel. That means that you have fewer opportunities to layer on stuff. So I think of a novel that's divided into chapters. I call it my ascending pearl theory of storytelling.
Okay.
Which is a pearl starts because there's an irritant inside the clam, and the clam then covers that with a smooth shell. But then the shell is irritating, and it covers it, and it just keeps building that way. Well, the narrative of a story builds that way too. Whatever your reader comes in with before they read your first word is they're a blank slate. Mm-hmm. But when they finish the first chapter, you've provided them information about the world, right? That's the grain. And then they take that information with them when they read your second chapter. So they're not starting for nothing anymore. They're building on these layers of information as we go on until we get to the end of the novel. You have fewer chances to build layers in a short story. You've got to get to what it is that you're trying to say about the world or your characters in less movement, right? But I think that in a lot of ways that's easy, not hard. But it's easy because of a theory that James Joyce had about epiphanies.
Okay.
Right? Joyce talked about, he borrowed the word epiphany from religious things. Epiphany means the voice of God. That's something like that, a revelation. But he said that our lives are filled with tiny epiphanies all the time, right? You see a sunset and this would be a big epiphany. You see a sunset and you're momentarily moved because it made you think about your place in the universe. Right? You had a tiny epiphany. Somebody said a kind thing to you in a moment when you weren't expecting kindness. You may experience an epiphany from that. Three people walking in the woods might be experiencing different kinds of epiphanies along the way, because one of them is just chatting about himself and they had no epiphany. They were all self-centered. But somebody else maybe noticed that the leaves were changing. It made him think a moment about mortality. And somebody else noticed that the sun set earlier, and that made him think about the passage of time, right? All these little epiphanies. Well, a short story is about an epiphany.
Okay.
It's about reaching a moment where your character's life has changed. They've grown in understanding, or they've lessened in naivete, right? A lot of literature is about characters who learn better by the end. It's about loss of innocence. In our English classes, a lot of times it seems like that's what we teach exclusively, which is why I get asked the question about English classes. Why does everything that we read in our class, why is it so depressing? And that's because losing innocence is depressing.
Yeah.
It just is. So even a gritty novel like Of Mice and Men is about characters who started off really low, and over the course of the novel, as we're accreting all of these things, totally kicks their ass at the end, right? And it is so sad as you reach that epiphany, which is the ending line of A Mice and Men is one of the characters says about our main character and the manager that are walking away. He says, "Oh, I wonder what's eating those guys." Well, we know, right? We know exactly what is eating them. That's an epiphany. But you don't need to go a whole novel to get there. And a novel can be filled with multiple epiphanies. So can a short story. It can have more than one. But you have more room to do it.
Sure.
Now, theoretically, then, the impact of a novel can be greater because you've been in that world longer, but doesn't necessarily get that way. And
Sure.
readers,
It could also be diluted.
Yeah.
Depending.
And readers' expectations of the reading experiences are different too.
Sure.
So if you were just drawn into the world of the story and you got to the end and it was a satisfactory conclusion for you, you didn't just say, "What's the point?" You might not be left particularly thoughtful or changed that you noticed.
Sure.
But my guess is that you were. And if you weren't, then you ended up saying, "What's the point?" What was the point of that? And that's the worst thing that you can say about any piece of literature or a film or anything else, right? I got to the end of the,
Well, that sure was a book.
yeah, what the heck about that? So I really like the short form. I've written 2 novels. I've published 2 novels. I've written a couple others, but I've published 2. And I like the novel form, but I really like finishing, and I like starting.
Sure.
And those are 2 rushes that you get. And I don't know, it's like painting on a small canvas.
Okay.
And trying to do something really profound with a canvas that's that big, as opposed to, I was in the Boston Fine Art Museum last week. There are paintings there that are 12 feet.
Yeah, like the whole wall.
20 feet, right? And going, how in the world did you paint that? It's just a bigger canvas.
Sure.
So I don't know that that's, I don't think that structurally or craft-wise there's any difference between what the skills that are necessary to tell a short story and the skills that are necessary to tell a novel. If you're a good novelist, you're writing probably in discrete scenes.
True.
Right? And every scene is potentially a story. I've recommended to several novelists that have the novel finished and are wondering what to do with it. And I say, can you extract short stories from chapters? And I was just talking to one a couple weeks ago at this conference I was at, that writer's retreat I was at, and he had never thought of that before. I said, well, you're right. I've got a couple of chapters that even if you didn't know what was going on at the end, with a little tweaking, and then they, were able to do something with it. And I think a good novel is like that. It has discrete parts, and those should function. It's not like you just flop around in a novel for 400 pages, and in the last 10 pages it all comes together. There's coherence and satisfactory building of tension, and there's releases, just everything
Mm-hmm.
that you expect. So that's a long answer to the question, which I just come back to saying, no, if you can write a novel, you can write a short story, and vice versa.
People keep telling me that, and I have yet to successfully do it. In college, we had an assignment in a creative writing class to write a short story. It could be no longer than 20 pages, and I got to page 30, and I was like, I think I'm a third of the way through this. Is it cool if I read a longer one? And she's like, absolutely not. It's a short story class. You have to write a short story. And I really struggled with that because I'm always like, well, but there's more information that I need to tell you. Well, and then it's not satisfying if you don't know this, and this doesn't happen. I also, these days, I'm writing mostly romance, and romance I find it really hard to distill. I guess I could do a meet cute version where it's just the kernel, the beginning of a relationship, not necessarily seeing the trials and tribulations to get to that point. But even that, I'm like, well, but then I want to know what happens next. It's why I'm a TV person and not a film person, where I'm like, no, 3 hours isn't enough. I need at least 13 hours with these people.
Well,
So.
you write another short story and just call it chapter 2.
Well, there's that.
Where are you going?
That's true. That's true. That's fair.
That's what you've got going.
So, what else can you tell us from the maybe submission perspective of someone who is better at writing short stories than me? What are the things that they should be thinking about when they go out into the world of, I would love to submit this to a literary magazine, to an anthology collection? Like, what are the things you think people miss most often?
Just the information about where to find out what the markets are.
Okay.
So it used to be that I would buy the Writer's Digest Guide to the Markets once a year.
Okay.
Big, fat phone book of a book. But now that we're in the computer age, you don't need to do that. You can just search for markets online. Because I write science fiction, fantasy, and horror, I use Duotrope, which is a paid subscription service, but not very much, and another one called the Submission Grinder, which is free.
Okay.
And for short fiction, you just tell the search engine within the program, here's how long the story is, here's the genre. There are other limiting factors you can put in if you want. You can screen it by pay scale or things like that. Limited demographics maybe, and it'll spit out. This magazine is looking for that kind of story. They're paying 15 cents a word. Here's where you send, and here's information you need to know about how they like it to be formatted, and then you send it. Right. So sitting right here, right now, if you gave me 1,000 words and called it a short story, I'll bet you we could get it submitted and before this interview ends.
Wow.
So you just need to know where to go. And the other thing I found, and I don't want to dismiss this at all, is you've got to be willing to pull the trigger. And I know writers, I talked to some at this writers retreat who had been going to writers retreats and had attended writing workshops like Odyssey or Clarion and have been doing this kind of work for several years and said, well, where are you submitting? And there's two guys. They were both in their mid-20s. And they said, well, we haven't sent anything yet. And I just get, holy Moses. You are massively overeducated for not having submitted anything anywhere.
Yeah.
You're crazed, right? It's to show me something today. This is your writing assignment. Give me something that you have in the past. We'll take a look at it and let's get it submitted somewhere. And that's what we did.
I love that. Now, something that I noticed, because I hadn't submitted for literary magazines for a long time, and I was submitting some poetry recently, and I saw that cover letters had become pretty standard, and I hadn't seen that prior. Is that more a standard thing in prose as well, is including a cover letter with your story submission? Have you seen that? Do you have advice on cover letters?
Well, it depends on the market. Most of them will take a cover letter. Most of them will say they don't read the cover letter until they've decided whether they're going to take the story.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
and then at that point, what are they looking for in that?
Nothing in particular. Right? There's nothing in the cover letter that has anything to do with whether they take it or not, unless you are writing from a limited demographic.
Got it.
And then you need to tell them
the own voices. This is my perspective.
I'm an incarcerated
Sure.
person, and here's where I'm incarcerated.
Right. I'm a queer writer.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Other than that, almost nothing. My cover letters are almost always the same. I have a sentence that says, here's would you please consider this? And then I name the title for whatever publication. My work has previously appeared in, and then I list 3 things that I think might be interesting to that market's editors.
Sure.
And that's it. I'm out.
What about those writers who hadn't submitted anything and don't have previous publication credits?
Don't put in that sentence.
Simple as that.
Really, it does not. Where I've been previously published won't do anything for this. Gardner Dozois, who used to edit Asimov's, said that when he read cover letters ahead of time, or he had preview readers, slush pile readers.
Sure.
He said, take out people who have previous publishing experience, right, and credits, and put them in a separate pile, because at least we know that they have at one time or another achieved publishability.
Sure.
So I would like to read those separately. But he said it doesn't matter. He still rejects the story if it doesn't fit the magazine. So a little bit extra attention, I don't know. I've been publishing now for 36 years. I think within the very small pond that is short science fiction, fantasy, and horror, that I'm known. But I don't think it's ever sold a story. I've never had anybody say, well, we kicked that guy out because we wanted a Van Pelt in our byline.
Sure.
If I was, I don't know, Connie Willis, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. So you've obviously also worked on the other side of this, not just as a submitter, but as a curator, as an editor. So what can you tell us from that perspective? Like when we talk about slush piles, when we talk about when you start reading, you can tell if it's a good fit or not. Like what are the parameters there? What's the rubric that you tend to be using? Obviously, it's different for each publication, but I'm sure there's some generalizations here.
I'm glad you went with rubric. That's
We're gonna
great. Teacherly word.
Listen, we're on theme.
Right.
We got to stick to our roots.
When I was reading Slush for the first time, I took the pile of manuscripts, and I'd never read Slush before, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm reading stories. I'm going, is this good? I don't know. Am I flawed as a reader?
Right. Comes back to how do we define good?
Right. Because I took writing and literature classes, and I read some stuff that were classics, and I thought they sucked. So I'm thinking I would have been a bad editor for this kind of stuff. But what happens is you start reading the next story and the next and the next and the next, and you begin to develop your aesthetic for what you're looking for and what works for you as a reader. And also if you're an editor and you have a particular audience in mind, you also read kind of with that group mind.
Sure.
Right? Like I know the people who read for what if I was doing a horror mystery anthology, right? Ghost detectives and, zombie police forces and stuff, which would be fun. Right?
You've already sold me on this fictional anthology.
So I know that the audience is probably looking for some particular notes.
Okay.
Right? And I can read for those. And I might say, that one, that's a little familiar to me, but I am a very experienced reader. If I'm going to only choose things that are unique to me, I'm not going to buy anything for a long time.
Sure.
And I can assemble my anthology that I think is all good, competently written, and hopefully there are some stars in there, some gems, but that I won't be cheating the reader out of the money that they paid to buy the anthology. So, but to get back to the beginning of the question, is I do know oftentimes very early when I'm reading a story if I'm going to want to continue reading the story. And that's because there are all kinds of markers in writing that happen on the first page. And it's not, I was going to say it's not that the blazingly good stands out, but the standard approaches are recognizable.
Sure.
But the reason I put that qualifier on that is if you're not doing the standard approaches and it works, it's blazingly awesome.
Yeah.
And so I would be reading, I would take these manuscripts down to the student union. It was for the California Quarterly. And I'm surrounded by other students, and I'm reading through these, and I got my Diet Coke sitting there and a bagel maybe.
Of course.
And
setting the scene.
One after another says, no, it's not bad, but it's not going to be a winner. Yeah. It's okay. The vast mass of stuff that's submitted to the magazines is competently written.
Sure. But
then I would read something that was special, right? Didn't Melody share with us the beginning sentence of something that was just, you did.
The
right?
Hemlock and Silver from
Exactly.
T. Kingfisher.
Do you remember it?
It's something to the effect of, I had just taken the poison when the king informed me he had murdered his wife.
Okay. I'm going to read sentence 2.
Right?
Okay?
You can't not.
Now that's a knockout first sentence, and a lot of writers think, well, I have to have a knockout first sentence. Then not necessarily, but you have to not sound like everybody else's first paragraph.
Yeah, there still needs to be some kind of hook.
Right. So if you spend the first page describing how your character wakes up, massive number of manuscripts do that.
Yeah.
Right. I opened my eyes, wondered where I was, and oh no. Right. Or looking out a window. Right. So I stared at the window and I go, oh, for God's sake. I've seen this so many times that the things that aren't like that caught my attention.
Sure.
Right? Now that sounds really hard because how do you be original? But I think there is a shortcut to it.
Okay.
And the easy way to be original is to be ferociously specific.
Yes.
Because no one can make up your details. So if the first sentence is, this would be a bad sentence.
Okay.
If anybody's writing this down. She looked out the window and noticed something. Oh, man.
Well, good for her.
So starts off with she. We don't know who she is. We don't know anything about where this window is. And she saw something, right? So the sentence is a total waste, right? I don't think it's much of a hook.
No.
Right?
We have no information. We have nothing to compel us to continue.
Well, on some level, mediocre writing has a tendency to trundle along at that level of specifics sharing.
Sure.
And it's low. So a really good writer can give you so much in one paragraph that under a less skilled hands couldn't do it in 10 pages.
Sure.
They just don't know how to do it. So just get really specific and you're going to catch the mind. And I would say write from the things that you care about. Don't write about what you think the editor wants. Write that story that you have to tell or you want to read.
I think that's the big one, is the one that you want to read. Because so professionally, I work primarily with filmmakers, and the number of times that I've been working with a filmmaker and they're trying to explain an idea to me, and then I stop them for a second, I say, based on what you just told me, would you care? Is this something that you're interested in? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, I mean, not really, but like that's what the market's wanting right now, right? Like that's what. And I said, nope, we're already behind. Because first of all, we don't know what the market wants, especially in film and TV, which moves much more slowly. Like what is trending in a moment is not the thing you're pitching on. You're trying to pitch on what the next trend is going to be. So you've already lost there. But also, it's like, of course, you're having trouble explaining this idea to me. You don't care about it. So if you don't care about it, why am I going to care about it? This cynical way of like paint by numbersing art in order to be, to get attention is such a sad thing to do to yourself, because creating art is so special. So if you don't care about it, if you don't like it, if it's not interesting to you, of course it's not going to be interesting to anyone else.
Right.
So remember that. Write something that you want to read. Number one, you can make it good later, but it's really, really challenging to make something good if you start from a place of not caring.
Exactly. Or not knowing enough either.
Sure.
When I'm critiquing a story, a lot of times I'll ask the writer, well, what's in the other rooms of the house, right? Or what is your character reading right now? Or what's down the street? Or what childhood trauma? Or all
What's their
these
pet
kind of
peeve?
questions. And over and over again, the answer is, oh, I don't know. Hadn't thought of that. Right? What's the relationship? And those sound like just deep background questions, but it could be more things like, what was the critical moment with the friend character in here? Why are they friends? What do they share? I don't know. So you haven't really invested your own thinking into making the story something you can care about, because it has no details, it has no edges, it has no contrasts, right? No bright spots and no dark spots. That's what we need to work on. And when you're in a writing critique session that gets there, you're starting to sound more like the writer's therapist than you are their writing coach. But that's where you need to be.
Absolutely. I think also something about that specifics that is hopefully useful to people is I get a lot of people asking questions of like, I don't want to go to a writer's group, or I don't want to do an open mic because I'm worried people are going to steal my idea. And my answer to them is always like, ideas are cheap, execution is king. If somebody can steal your idea and be successful off of it, it wasn't because it was the idea. It was because their interpretation of that idea was really unique. And that doesn't preclude you from doing your version of it. But no one can steal your story unless they are wholesale lifting your pages and passing it off as something else, which is an entirely separate issue that pretty much never happens. But don't be afraid to share your ideas and the starting of something, because if you're doing this correctly, only you can write the version of the story that you're going to tell. No one can steal that from you.
Exactly.
So stop worrying about that so much. Invest in your peers and your community, and share things, because you are going to get better out of it, and no one is going to steal it. And if they do, again, that's not what they're stealing.
Right.
They're stealing inspiration, but they were going to do that anyways. So why bother about it?
Well, in most ideas, here's a good exercise which I've used with writers who are worried about this. It said, take your favorite pieces of literature and write the elevator pitch for me for that. And almost all of them, when you boil down the idea of a novel into 2 or 3 sentences, sound dumb.
Right.
Just why would it? The thumbnail sketch for Star Wars is just juvenile and stupid, right? But it's the same for Wuthering Heights and The Great Gatsby and all these other kind of things. They all sound dumb. So go ahead, take your dumb idea. Don't worry about anybody thinking it's dumb, and then just write the heck out of it and have fun with it and polish it into a thing that you'd be glad that you had written. And then you can try the marketplace.
Absolutely. So that brings up a good point about the way that you describe the thing that you're doing. And I imagine this, comes into play when you're curating a collection and things like that. So on a blurb level, what are the things that we need to know about blurbs, where they go, what their function is, how to make them something that people want to pick up? Talk about blurbs.
I'm writing a blurb right now for a book called The Book of Bots by James Patrick Kelly. He's a really famous within science fiction circles short story writer, and he's putting together a collection of his robot stories. So I have the manuscript, and I'm trying to write the blurb for it. Sometimes a blurb can make someone say, that sounds interesting, I want to read it. Most of the time, the function of the blurb is it's attached to a name that the reader already knows.
Sure.
And this reader is recommending this piece.
Lending credibility.
I always kind of doubt the efficacy of blurbs.
Okay.
I would, if Stephen King was willing to write me a blurb, boy, I would take that to the bank. But for most other things, it's something that you expect to read because it gives you maybe a tiny glimpse into what the book is about, what kind of book it is. It serves a function that way. A well-written blurb can tickle you in some way or another, just like a well-written critique or review can tickle you in some way or another. But most of the time, there's a chance that, especially if you're a new writer, that the people you get to blurb your book will be as equally unknown as you are.
Sure.
And it's kind of filling the form of what you're looking for when you pick up a book. I expect to see, where's the blurbs?
Sure.
Right?
Has anyone read this thing?
Exactly. And if it's a short story collection that the writer is doing, you may be able to get blurbs. I suggest you do, because the readers expect to see blurbs. But you have to make other decisions too, like would you like to have a foreword written for your book? Or do you want to write a foreword? Do you want to not have a foreword at all and just start off with the stories, which some collections do? Do you want to have a short intro to each story? I have a collection called The Experience Arcade where I wrote an intro to each story for the readers. They're like little teasers for the story. And then an epilogue for each story for writers and teachers.
Oh, I love that.
So there was a lot of extra material there.
Sure.
It had a foreword and it had an epilogue.
Okay.
So when I was a young reader, I skipped all that stuff. I just wanted to read the stories. But as an older reader, I love forewords. I like that extra information. So you're making decisions if you're putting together a collection about what all you want to contain within the book outside of the stories.
Sure. Okay, very cool. So when you're blurbing for somebody, kind of what are your priorities as a blurb writer? Because you often don't have a lot of space, right? So you got to make it real punchy, but specific enough that it's useful. So for you, like what are the things you're looking for to include in a blurb? Where does blurbing come from in your sort of brain? Your emotional reaction, your craft reaction,
Yeah, but it's like writing a haiku.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have very many words to mess with. You want them to sound good words. I don't want to write a blurb that's generic. There's a pretty famous writer in science fiction who I'd met. And for one of my short story collections, I saw him at a convention. I asked him if he'd blurb it. And he said, oh, yeah, I'd love to. And I said, can you give me your email address and then I can send you the manuscript? He says, oh, don't bother. I know you. Here's the blurb. And you go, oh my gosh, I felt like heaven should open up and bolts of lightning come down for that. You're going to give me a blurb and you don't know anything about the
Sight
content of the
unseen.
books?
There's something that's very flattering about that, but also there's something a little frustrating. Like, yeah, but I want you to read it. This is good, and I'm proud of it.
What kind of blurb is he going to write?
Sure.
He says, James Van Pelt is a marvelous writer. Don't miss his work. He's contributing to the history of the field.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah, you don't need to read it for. If he believes that's true, then I guess it's true no matter what.
It doesn't matter what the book's about.
Mm-hmm.
It's his personal endorsement of me.
Sure.
So a blurb can do that.
Okay.
The book I'm writing, or the blurb I'm writing for this guy, is a writer who I've admired all my writing life.
Okay.
Kind of a hidden mentor. So I want to do it justice, but I also know him pretty well, so it's hard not to make it funny.
Fair.
In some way or another. Like my first blurb I wrote was James Patrick. I've been reading James Patrick Kelly since I was a child. I'm 71 years old now, and he's still knocking them out of the park. And I just think that's funny because he's only 2 years older than me.
That is funny.
And he would think it's funny too, right? It sounds like a blurb though, doesn't it?
Yeah, that does.
Right? So
It's punchy.
I don't know. I think that he's written significantly about robots as a topic, but more importantly, a lot of times you're reading a story of his and you don't even realize it's about robots because everything is so interesting about them
Mm-hmm.
and about the characters that are interacting with them. And so I wrote a blurb like that. I've sent 3 blurbs to the publisher so far,
Okay.
and he said, "Well, no rush, keep working."
So is it a thing where like you'll send them a couple of things and they'll pick one that they like? Are they going to use different ones in different contexts?
I don't know. They could.
Okay.
In electronic publishing, you can go a lot of different ways because you can put out different
True. Editions.
editions.
Okay, that
different
makes sense.
information.
I guess also for marketing, it's probably useful. They can make a little Instagram graphic for you.
Right, exactly. And I've had some very flattering blurbs about my own stuff that I thought, well, I'd like to put that in a little frame
Mm-hmm.
for what it's worth. However, I got a come on from a book promoting agency just like a week ago.
One of those.
And it was this long letter about my last collection, which was the best of James Van Pelt. It was really flattering and really detailed. And, we love
Oh, so
that
it was
you're
like
doing
a
this.
real play. This isn't like a bot email.
No,
Okay.
it was a total bot.
Oh, wow.
It was AI just scrapes through the reviews of the stories. and
Oh, so they're
reviews of the
stealing
book.
other people's kind words
Right.
to make it seem like it's their saying. Oh,
So
wow.
I'm reading this. I'm thinking, well, if a human wrote this, man, they really want me. 'Cause it was easily 700-800 words about my
Oh,
book.
my gosh.
And so, of course, I did some research and found that the company has never done anything for anybody. It's not registered
Yeah.
anywhere. It's just they want me to say, sure, I'd buy your services
Mm-hmm.
so I can send them a check.
Yeah, there's a lot of that out there, unfortunately, and especially if you're in like indie publishing and stuff, it can feel like, oh, someone's chosen me.
Right.
The validation, finally.
Exactly.
But you should never have to pay for reviews.
No.
It's,
Do you want to talk a little bit about how a collection comes together?
I was
How
just
you
going to
can get
transition
to
us
it?
back to that because I definitely wanted to talk about rejection, which is a part of that. So, how does a collection come together?
Well, I'm asked most of the time when either somebody knows me as a writer or they ask what I do, and I say, right, and they said, are you working on a book?
Mhm.
I'm a short story writer.
Sure.
So the answer is yes, of course, all the time. I'm working on the next collection.
Right.
Okay, I have my first collection came out in, I wrote it down somewhere, 2002.
Okay.
2002. And I have 6 collections now.
Wow.
So they keep coming out. But I don't write the short stories with the idea that I'm writing a book.
Okay.
I get to a certain point where I have a lot of stories that have been published in a bunch of different places, and my publisher says, I think it's time for another collection. And that's how we do it.
Okay.
That is unique to me in the relationship with my publisher. Because if someone was listening to this and saying, well, I don't know a publisher, right? Well, how do you do it? How do you get one published? And the quick answer to that is if you have a collection of stories, you can approach a traditional publisher, a big house publisher.
Mhm.
It's unlikely that you'll get much traction with that. When I first started writing short stories, I thought I'm never going to get a book published because it seemed to me the only books short story collections were being published were by big name writers
Yeah.
whose publishing houses were doing it for them as a favor
Sure.
because they're not going to make as much money on a short story collection as they would a novel.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, oh, I guess I got to write a couple kick-butt novels to get a short story collection done. But it turns out that that model, which I knew in 80s when I first started writing short stories seriously, doesn't exist in that way. Or it does exist, but there are parallel tracks now.
Okay.
So there are a lot of smaller indie kind of publishers, small house publishers who like short story collections and might be willing to take a flyer on somebody who has none of these stories have been published yet. It's unlikely, by the way, that would happen.
Sure.
Having short stories published somewhere gives them at least the imprimatur of publishable quality work. But it could happen, right? I mean, somebody writes short stories, they send to the publisher reads one, just for the heck, and they go, wow, I like that. And then they keep reading and you do a book. So you can go small publishers that way. You can also do, and now it is so easy to self-publish the book.
Yeah.
And I'm looking into some self-publishing because I'm interested in releasing previously published stories, but in short-themed collections.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a collection that has like a half a dozen stories about classrooms and teachers. They're all science fiction and fantasy.
Right.
Half a dozen stories about first contact. Half a dozen stories about time travel. Thin books, because I like thin books, right? I like a book that I can take with me on the plane and finish by the time I get done. I like a book I can take with me camping, right? A big beach read is not what I want to throw in my backpack.
Sure.
So, and I just like the idea of doing it because it's kind of fun. The whole process for me is fun. I did a book for Western Colorado Writers Forum last year. Well, I guess it's last year. Western Colorado Voices. I used Kindle Direct Print.
Yep.
No money. Cost me nothing to send them the manuscript and them to send me back a book. Well, it cost me $4
Yeah.
for the book.
Yeah, the printing
right?
cost for the test copy.
Can I push pause for a second? Michael is here.
Okay.
I'm gonna either let him in the hallway in here or let him in here. So
Cool. I think we're circling towards our conclusion. We're bringing it together. We're making a collection.
Okay. Yeah, because I have thoughts. I did write thoughts about ways you can approach a collection.
Okay.
And I can run through them pretty quickly.
Cool.
Okay. And then I also have recommendations for good collections to read.
Yep. I was going to end with so if we want to get into short story collections, what would you recommend? Where should we start?
Yeah.
Cool.
I wrote down a list. I hadn't really done it of when every one of my books has been published.
Oh, wow.
Since The Best of James Van Pelt came out in 2020, this is the longest gap I've had in 26 years. No, 24 years. Michael.
Hey, Jim.
Hello. We're just finishing up this episode.
Literally, I was hoping just to come in and say hello.
I'm going to stay because I want to hassle him from the distance.
Perfect. A background heckler. Just every once in a while we'll hear somewhere off mic. Hey. All right. So putting together short story collections.
So if I was talking to a short story writer and they're wondering about how to put together a collection, they have a bunch of different things that they can think about. One is, of course, you need to have suitable number of stories to put together. So when you've written 3 short stories, you're probably not ready to consider doing a collection. But if you've got a dozen of them and you can choose among them a thin collection of a half a dozen stories, very much within your reach.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and do that. If you are unpublished, that means probably you're going to be self-publishing it. It's not a given. But I'm thinking if you're writing short stories, why aren't you trying the markets with them? It costs nothing. And when you make a sale, you're becoming more professional. I mean, by definition, you are a pro.
Yeah.
But also, it means that you're interacting with the publishing world with a clear idea that I'm trying to write a work that would interest an editor because the editor thinks this will interest an audience.
Sure.
If you're writing and you're just, determined to ignore the idea that you might have an audience, you're either a genius, which is possible. I'm not going to disregard that. Or maybe you need a gatekeeper. You need somebody to tell you this isn't very good yet. You may love it. Maybe your mom liked it or your girlfriend or boyfriend said, yeah, lovely work, but it might not be good yet.
Sure.
But let's go ahead and say that you've got your 6 stories and they're unpublished. You can self-publish. You can find out how to do that. You can get artwork. You can get blurbs if you want them. You can write an intro if you want it. And then all you have to decide is what order do I want my stories in? And traditionally, or maybe a standard practice for a short story collection is you lead and end with your 2 strongest pieces.
Sure.
So when the person picks it up in the bookstore or opens it up, they read the first couple pages and go, oh, this is pretty good. You may want to consider what order you put the stories in. Most of the time you're thinking about changing tone. Like if you have a old person character in first person and the second story is also an old person character in first person, but it's a wholly different one, maybe you don't want those back to back.
Sure.
Something like that. But you can make decisions like that. They aren't as vital as you might think because, as someone pointed out to me, when people read short story collections, they don't always read them in order.
Right.
They just pick and choose.
It's almost like a
kind of stuff.
CD where it's like maybe you put
Right.
it on shuffle.
So you can, if you don't do the best story, last story, you can do them chronologically in the order that they're written because in that way, they kind of show your growth. My big collection, The Best of James Van Pelt, is all chronological.
Okay.
And there's 63 stories in there.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of stories, except the oldest story, which should have been the first story, was a story called Plant Life. It's blatantly sexual.
And you thought maybe that wasn't the vibe you wanted to start with.
Well, no, that's not the tone. I
Sure.
very seldom go there, but I did for this story. So I moved it 4 stories in.
Gotcha.
But other than that, it's all chronological. You might arrange them thematically.
Okay.
So my first collection, I had a section that was just teaching stories. The second section was a story about love. Third story section was about death, and the last one was about time. You could do it that way. You could do it by length, which I think is a weird way to do it. But there's an anthology called The Binge Watcher's Cure,
Okay.
and they buy stories by length. So they want one 500-word story. They want one 750-word story, and you fill that slot, and then that's how the book is arranged. And so it ends up with a novella.
That's
kind of thing.
fascinating.
I don't know why you would do that, but they like that. You might have the collection arranged, the stories might be related to each other, and they tell a story without being a novel. Okay, The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury is like that. They tell the overall story about the colonization and eventual abandonment of Mars. All different characters all the way through. Like if you were telling a bunch of stories about characters in the South during Prohibition, right? There might be relationships between them because of the time and everything else, and so they could be arranged that way.
Gotcha.
You could do an interwoven story. I really love this. I want to do one so badly. Bradbury's The Illustrated Man tells the story of a guy who meets a circus entertainer who calls himself the Illustrated Man. He's just covered with tattoos. And every tattoo tells a little story.
Oh,
And
I
so
see.
the stories in the book, The Illustrated Man, are the stories of these tattoos. And so
Sure.
we meet the Illustrated Man, and it's a very short section, and then we read the first story. And then we're back on the Illustrated Man, and our character who's reading these stories, the tattoos kind of come alive or something, and that's the story you see. I just think it's a fascinating way to build a short story.
Because in that way, you're not having to write an intro for each one.
Right,
You're sort of, there's like a frame story, high level, that's kind of doing that for you.
And I recommend that book anyways. It's just phenomenal. So other concerns you have if you're putting your collection together, do you want a foreword? Do you want an afterword? Do you want intros to the stories? Do you want blurbs? What are you going to do with your cover? How are you going to give this book exposure? Like, who's going to get to read it? Are you just going to put it on Kindle and put it on your Facebook? There are other ways you can do to get stuff out. How are you going to get reviews? All things that you need to think about. Not all of them are about putting the book together,
Sure.
right? Some of them are post-book.
Yeah, making the book's kind of the first step.
Yeah.
And there's like 5 other steps after that.
So you can go the plain unvarnished kind of way, which is I have 10 stories. I just want to put them out there. So you get the book designed, or you design the book yourself, and you put them in any order you want, and you put them out there. Okay. I like having a foreword in a book, even if I'm writing it. which I haven't written the forward to any of my books. I have other people write my forwards for me because they're friends and they like my work. But I like it as a reader too.
Sure.
I like an introduction to the voice I'm going to be listening to, but you don't have to have it.
Okay.
An epilogue where the writer talks about maybe the overall experience writing the stories
Sure.
or what they think their relationship with readers. You can do anything you want. You're the author.
The context
Right.
of when they were written, especially if
Exactly.
Yeah.
So all of those things can make you be able to answer the question that I am asked all the time. Are you working on a book?
Sure.
Yes, I'm writing short stories. I'm always working on a book.
I love that. All right. So one final thing I want to talk about before you give us some recommendations for great short story collections is the idea of rejection, both in your own manuscript of short stories, as well as submitting just one off to try and kickstart your publishing journey. So do you have anything encouraging to tell people if they do decide, like, I'm going to put up, I'm going to submit, I'm going to do it right now, and then unfortunately the story doesn't go forward? What would you tell an author who has gotten brave enough to submit, it just didn't work out this time?
Well, the author who was brave enough to submit, what I would tell them, the good news is you're already better than 95% of your peers who are not submitting. Right? You took a step, man. That is awesome. I think it's helpful to think that all of the writers who you love and admire and are making bucks, or their stuff are being turned into movies, or all that kind of stuff, were at one time exactly where you are right now. They'd not sold a thing, right? And the only way they got to where they are was because they sent that first story out. Also, I think that when you send a story out, you're opening a conversation with the world of publishing. And that first thing you sent out, I hope you do what I was advised by George Sithers in the first rejection I got back from him. He wrote, his first sentence was, "I hope while you're waiting to hear me from about this, that you're working on your next." And I submitted for a long time. I sent my first short story out, I think, in my modern era in 1984.
Okay.
And I didn't sell anything until either very late 1989 or early 1990.
Wow.
So 6 years.
Yeah.
And that comes from a guy who was an English teacher at the time, and a lifetime reader of science fiction and fantasy. I mean, a really big fan. So I think my life of reading was sort of like graduate studies for writers. I didn't know it, but that's what I was doing. And it still took me 6 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it'll take whoever I'm talking to 6 years, right? They might find that their first story sells to the first market. I know somebody like that. The first story they sent sold to the first market, and so did the second story. And then didn't sell anything for 6 more years.
Yeah.
Okay, right? That can happen. I talked to George Sithers later, the guy that had sent me that letter when he started buying stories from me, years later, by the way. And I'd had a particularly good month. I'd sold 5 stories or something in a month. And so I'm talking to him, and he says, "Well, enjoy it while you can. Writing is a roller coaster."
Yeah.
And so he's right. Here we are in March. Last year I sold 9 short stories. I haven't sold a story yet in 2026. I'm starting to get worried about it.
But it's only March.
Well, everybody has the story of their first sale. You don't ever hear very often about the story of the last sale. So that was it. The magic ran out for you. I don't think that's true.
No.
But you can't help but feel it.
It's true. One thing I will say from the curatorial perspective, so I don't do lit mags, but I am regularly a judge for film festivals. And something that I try to tell people when I'm talking about submitting to film festivals and getting your projects seen and validated externally is that a lot of the time when a project gets rejected from the event, it has nothing to do with the project. It has something to do with a million other things. Sometimes it's a matter of we already have a film with this subject that we've already accepted, and it just doesn't make sense to have 2, unless this is the theme of the festival, which it isn't. It's just going to look strange. We have to pick one. Sometimes it's a matter of this is brilliant. It doesn't look like anything else we've got. And so it's not to say that it's any less brilliant or the other things aren't brilliant, but it's that we're putting together a complete piece of work. In a film festival, it's an event, right? We're curating an event. In a short story collection, it is a curated singular piece of writing. And if there's one that looks distinctly different, it doesn't mean it's better or worse, but it's going to feel strange in this collection because you're curating an experience. There needs to be some level of consistency, even with the unique writers or filmmakers or storytellers overall. And so sometimes it's just a matter of this isn't the right fit for this story. So it's oftentimes not about the story itself. It's just about a million other considerations that people are having to put together, right? Like publishing is not a meritocracy, and neither is putting together a short story collection. Of course, these are some of the best things we read, but they're also the best things that we read that make sense as a complete product. And sometimes yours isn't going to fit in that. So don't, think, oh, this story got rejected. I guess it has no home anywhere, right? How many stories have we heard about authors who submitted the same manuscript for years and hundreds of rejections until it finally got the thing that it needed, and now it's so popular. So just because you're receiving a rejection doesn't mean that it's a rejection of you or your talent or anything like that. At a certain point, you should probably move on and write that next story and continue to hone your craft. But also, a singular rejection often is nothing to do with you. So don't take it so personally.
Absolutely. I've sold stories that have been rejected. My record for a sale for most number of rejections before it was sold was 49 for a story that circulated for 10 years.
Right.
So, I don't know. I just did a talk about what is good and Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is sort of the place to start if you want to discuss what is good. That novel or that whatever it is had a couple hundred rejections before somebody bought it. We know Harry Potter was rejected an awful lot.
Right.
So rejection is just a part of participating.
Yeah.
And I think that you should wear your rejections like badges of honor, because that meant you were participating, you were trying.
You were brave enough to put yourself out there.
Pulled the trigger. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of people who pulled the trigger successfully and that we love, can you recommend any short story collections for us?
Because I love science fiction, fantasy, and horror, I lean that way.
Sure.
But I think anybody and everybody should read Ray Bradbury. Okay. The Martian Chronicles is incredible. The Illustrated Man has that connective tissue, which I just think is fascinating and a good story on its own. And I Sing the Body Electric, 3 Ray Bradbury collections. You can't go wrong with any of them.
Okay.
Kelly Link, contemporary writer. Bradbury is passed, and so he's starting to look like a classic. Kelly Link wrote The Fairy Handbag and Magic for Beginners, fantasy collections that she just blows everybody out of the water in terms of how she writes, like Ted Chiang, who wrote A Story of Your Life, which was turned into a movie, but it's also a collection. And he seems incapable of writing anything except award winners. We talk about people getting rejections. Everything he publishes wins major awards. I assume that he has some sort of pact.
Sure.
With something.
He is the exception, not the rule.
Connie Willis, The Winds of Marble Arch, that collection for science fiction is just incredible for one of our best science fiction writers, especially in short form. The Wind's 12 Quarters, Ursula Le Guin, Daryl Gregory's Unpossible. But, that's there. I think you ought to read the classics too. Mm-hmm. Okay, some of them are less approachable, and so you're trying to figure out, why is this a classic? Like if you read James Joyce's Dubliners, what's he doing? Why is this a classic? And get you out of there. Or J.D. Salinger's 9 Stories, the complete stories of Flannery O'Connor, which, oh my gosh, just amazing stuff. Shirley Jackson's collection, which I think is called The Lottery and Other Stories. She could write short stories like nobody's business. Clive Barker's Books of Blood. You may not like horror, and if you don't like horror, I don't think you like Books of Blood, because it's scary, disturbing, really good stuff. Stephen King's Night Shift, which is Stephen King's, that book made me convinced I needed to sell a short story before I turned 30 because he sold his first short story when he was 29. So I'm going to do that. I want to write a short story. I have it in a diary entry. I want to write a short story that scares Stephen King.
I love that.
Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio, right? If you go to Barnes & Noble, you may find it tough to find short story collections. right? Because they're not sorted generally together. You have to know what
Yeah.
you're looking for. And they are a niche kind of literature that really valorizes the novel, right? Prioritizes the novel. But I love short fiction. I love a story that I can pick up, read, be moved, and put down all in a single sitting. I think it's a great art form. I've been going the other way. You talk about things getting longer for you. I've been experimenting the other way, writing drabbles, right?
And flash fiction and
Complete
stuff.
stories in 100 words.
Yeah.
Or yes, flash, things under 500 or things under 1,000. I really like that form. I just think that it's fun to do. Plus, for a writer, you need practice, right? And I think the toughest thing in the world is to practice writing novels.
Yeah.
Because, oh my God, it's like saying I want to be a runner. I'm only going to run marathons.
It's probably
Right?
that's fair. That's a
And
fair
so-
thing to say.
Because they take, well, my first novel took me 4 years to write. That's a long time to write a novel. Not nearly as long as some people have spent. People who are making their money writing novels don't take 4 years generally to write, right? They're writing faster than that.
Yeah.
But it's a long haul.
Yeah.
And a short story, well, Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451 when he was very poor. And this was pre-computers and everything. So he was trying to figure out how he was going to get this thing to a publisher. And he was in the library. He spent an incredible amount of time in libraries. He loved libraries. And he heard this clattering from downstairs. And it turns out they had a bank of typewriters that you could rent for 10 cents for a half hour. And it had a little timer on it. You plugged it in. He wrote Fahrenheit 451 on that, right?
Wow.
I think it was something like $4.90 in dimes, right? And he wrote very fast because the
Yeah.
timer was clicking on him,
Sure.
right? So you don't have to take 4 years like I did to write a novel, but a novel is a heavy lift.
Yeah.
And you can write short stories, and you can try your hand at the format and experiment. I did a challenge for myself. Bradbury suggested it was I wrote a story a week for a year,
Wow.
and didn't miss for 52 weeks.
Wow.
And I learned so much about writing by doing that. And I would learn a lot by writing a novel too. I'd learn novel things.
Sure.
But you know what I learned 52 times? How to begin, how to set a scene, how to create conflict, how to resolve. 52 times in a year. I can't do that with 52 novels.
I mean, you could try. If you were
Yeah,
Stephen
right.
King, maybe you could try.
King,
But again, exception, not the rule. Well, I think that's a lovely place to end. Thank you so much for sharing this. It sounds like we have a lot more to talk about with short fiction. So maybe we'll have to have you come back and we'll talk about it in more depth. But for now, make sure to check out those story collections that you mentioned. Is there anything you'd like to plug? Things that are coming up for you that we should be checking out?
my 7th short story collection is being put together right now. It'll come out in 2027.
Okay.
It's entitled tentatively Slow Dance at the High School and Other Stories.
Okay.
But I always have short fiction coming up. And if you go to my Facebook profile, which I think is James Van Pelt 14, and the Facebook nomenclature, but you can find me by looking for me there, where I announce upcoming things or where things are appearing.
Great.
There's always something coming or something present.
Great.
Thank goodness.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having us. Thank you for having me here on this podcast.
Thank
I host.
you. It's so great to reconnect.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're reminding me why I was so inspired when I was in your classes. So thank you for continuing that. And thanks everybody for listening to High Desert Voices. We'll see you very soon.
High Desert Voices is the official podcast of the Western Colorado Writers Forum, a nonprofit organization based in Grand Junction, Colorado. The forum's mission is to foster a rich and diverse writing community on Colorado's western slope that invites participation from diverse cultures, customs, and life experiences. The forum hosts Writers' Night presentations at the Grand Junction Center for the Arts on the first Tuesday of every month, where local and national writers give presentations on their craft. Sign up for the forum's free newsletter and listen to all our podcast episodes for free at westernColoradoWriters.org.